I am so excited and so grateful for Dr. Purvi Parikh to be with us. I am such a fan. For those who don't know Dr. Parikh, the list goes on. She's clinical professor at NYU School of Medicine, a researcher in the COVID-19 vaccine trials. Actually, I first saw you in Dr. Ali Haider's live stream where you
Oh,
had the
nice.
live about the COVID-19 vaccine, which went really viral
Yeah, it went,
around here.
it's so funny. It went so viral that our chief of infectious disease at NYU, it like made it to him somehow.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, it made it through all of the people in our like vaccine center too.
Wow,
So
that's
I
amazing.
came in and they're all like, we saw you on Instagram. I'm like, you did? You know,
Every IG story that was passing through, it was that video for that whole week. I'm like,
that's
this is
so
amazing.
funny.
I'm like, who are these? And since then, I am so grateful, Dr. Purvi Parikh. I know you are so busy, and Dr. Parikh is also seen in all of the biggest news channels here in New York, in the nation, actually. So I guess let's just start out with your journey to medicine. How did it start? Were you the only one in your family?
Right, right. So it's funny because both of my parents are physicians. Actually, they
Wow.
met in medical school. So we have a lot of doctors in our family. So
Wow.
I grew up like seeing both the pros and the cons of medicine.
Yeah.
Like I always joke, like I was always the last kid picked up from school every day because my parents were always working, or I'd be doing homework in like the PACU, the OR. And so
Yeah.
I kind of saw that aspect of it. So it was always in the back of my mind. But like I was really into like debate and speech. So I was on like the
Mm,
debate team in high school, college. So I almost became a lawyer. And so,
wow.
yeah, and so I was actually a political science major and I was pre-med and I was going
Wow.
back and forth. But then ultimately I was like, the best way you can advocate for people is through their health, and
Yes.
I feel like I've found a way to combine both interests because, as you know, I'm very like vocal now about the
I know,
vaccine.
I
So,
know, I know. And for those who don't know, I just wanted to put it out there because it's so important. Dr. Purvi and I are birthday twins. We are
yes,
both May 9, both Tauruses. So I saw her post one day and I was like, I am your birthday twin. We
that's
are
so
birthday twins.
crazy.
I
Yeah, it's
know.
awesome. It's a great day to be born.
It's a great day to be born. I believe so. I agree with you. So allergy and immunology, how did you get into this specialty? Because from what I've been hearing is there's so many people who go into medical schools thinking, oh, I want to be a pediatrician. I want to be this. And then they change their mind once they start rotations in
Right.
medical school. So how did you end up in allergy and
Yeah.
immunology?
No, I'm glad you're asking because I think a lot of people aren't exposed to it at all.
Mhm.
Like in medical school, even in residency, most of my
Mhm.
co-residents, I think, have no idea what I do. But so I went into medical school. Like I was one of those people that liked everything. And I then
Mhm.
ultimately decided I wanted to do internal medicine because I had some amazing teachers and like it covers so many different specialties. And even then, I wasn't sure I wanted to do allergy and immunology. Like I loved
Mhm.
my cardiology rotation, my CICU. I was at Cleveland Clinic, so everyone was in love with
Yeah,
cardiology. I really liked pulmonary critical care. There's like I liked almost everything that I
everything.
rotated there. Yeah, but then intern year,
Mhm.
I took care of a patient that had common variable immune deficiency, which is
Mm.
this super rare immune deficiency. It's not super rare, actually. It's more common than you think it is, but it's an immune deficiency. And to me, it was rare. I had never even heard of it. And his allergist and immunologist would be coming in to see him every day and advise the team how to proceed. So there's all these people that are born without functioning immune systems. So I didn't realize that an allergist and immunologist did this, because backstory, my father is also an allergist and immunologist. So I had no idea what he did my whole life, because when you interact with your dad, he
Yeah,
basically is like parenting, right? You don't really talk
yeah.
about the specialty. So I had no clue what he did. And he did it through pediatrics. So in
Oh,
my
okay.
mind, I thought it was a pediatric only specialty. But yeah, so
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I wasn't even thinking about rotating it. So I was like, let me rotate in this field, see what else they do. And I found it very interesting because you treat all types of allergies,
Yeah,
asthma, they're on the rise, and now so many things are immune mediated in every
yeah,
field. I
yeah,
still get to do, cardiology. I still get to do
yeah.
pulmonary and my other interests. And interestingly enough, like around the time I was in Cleveland, the H1N1 pandemic broke out. And it wasn't at this scale by any
Hmm.
means, but
Hmm.
it was cool. That was my first insight into these vaccine
Hmm.
trials. Dr. Fauci was again leading the charge. He's an allergist and immunologist. So I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm like, they do this too. So I just liked it. I just thought it was a really diverse field because there's
Hmm.
so much you can do. And you see kids and adults.
Yeah.
It's not not as stressful on you, meaning like nights and weekends are not as
Yeah.
arduous as some
Yeah.
of the other fields. So that's how
But
I ended up here.
amazing. But what's arduous for sure is the whole medical process of
Right,
the whole pre-med to medical school, residency, all the financial aspect, all
right.
the time spent in training. What I've always liked asking physicians who are where they are now is, given the arduous and long timeline of medicine, do you have any regrets?
No, I don't actually, because yes, it takes a very long time, but I think there's a reason for that, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
taking care of people's lives. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure you're best prepared to do that, right? Because think about if it was your loved one, right? You would want
Yeah.
someone who was very well trained to do so. But the reason why there's no regrets is because even though it's very hard, there's high levels of burnout. I
Mm-hmm.
know another physician colleague that recently just killed themselves, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very sad. It's actually, I think, one of the most rewarding fields. And this is why I ultimately chose it over law, because when you can restore someone's health, right, and their well-being, there's nothing like it. It's
Yeah.
extremely rewarding, and you get to be with people in their most vulnerable time, but also in your most vulnerable time.
Yeah,
Like,
I
I think
agree.
people have a misconception of doctors from TV and stuff, but we're just as vulnerable as our patients because
Yeah,
we realize how serious it is.
I
We have so much
agree.
like lives in our hands. So I don't know. For all those reasons, I think there's no profession like it.
Yeah, I
And I
love
have
it.
no regrets.
I agree. I
And it's
agree.
never boring.
I for sure, I can imagine. And speaking of never boring, I can just imagine the amount of things that you see at work, whether it's in the unit or in the clinic. What I would like to ask is, what's the bread and butter of being an allergist and immunologist? Like, what's a
Yeah.
day to day like?
Right. Our field is mostly an outpatient based field, but we
Mm,
do see patients in the hospital. So we'll get consulted if someone had, an anaphylactic reaction or, severe allergy. They can be life threatening. And again, for those immune patients, whether they have like
yeah.
immune deficiency or autoimmune disease, but majority of the time, majority of the people we see is out of the hospital. And the bread and butter things are, we treat allergies. So yes, the itchy eye, stuffy nose. We treat asthma because that's the most common trigger is allergies. The most common cause of
Mm,
asthma is allergy. So we're actually considered asthma specialists. Ourselves
wow.
and
Okay.
our pulmonary colleagues are the
Mm-hmm.
asthma specialists. And then again, there's 300 interesting immune system problems called primary immune deficiencies,
Mm-hmm.
which actually are very common. They're like more common than things like multiple sclerosis and lupus, but they're very,
Oh,
very
wow.
underdiagnosed. And so it's
Mm,
kind of fun being the one that kind of ties it together
yeah.
for these patients because they've been going through so much for so long. So they said the average patient has a decade delay in their diagnosis,
Oh,
and you can
wow. A
imagine
decade.
what could go wrong, right? If your
Yeah.
immune system's not working in that decade.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's why I like it. It's just very diverse. And then we see both pediatrics and adults.
And
So
adults.
yeah, so you can do this specialty either through internal medicine, so you do internal medicine residency,
Mm-hmm.
or through pediatric. When you train as a fellow, you see both,
You
So
see
I
both.
was
Got
trained in internal medicine. One of my co-fellows was pediatric, but then we learn how to manage, people of all
both.
ages.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. You see people from the womb to the tomb,
Wow.
basically, like every age
For
group.
sure. That's amazing. It's just interesting how you could see an array of people in all ages. It sounds quite overwhelming, but I guess it all goes back to the thing we were talking about, how long it takes to get there. So I do have questions that people have submitted beforehand. And one of the questions, given that we're talking about allergies right now, is what is the weirdest or the rarest allergy that you have encountered so far?
Yeah, the rarest, which I think there's only like 50 or there's less than 100 cases in the
Mhm.
world or in the US, is you can actually become allergic to your own hormones, basically to progesterone. So the way that it
Mm.
happens is that if you take exogenous or oral progesterone, let's say through like a birth control tablet or another
Mhm.
medication, your immune system actually develops like antibodies against it. And it's actually
Wow.
called autoimmune progesterone. It can be just a rash like dermatitis.
Hmm.
Some people get like anaphylaxis though. So it's
Wow.
really debilitating because even if you are not no longer on birth control, you start
Hmm.
reacting to your own hormone. You're having like allergic reactions to yourself and
Yeah.
anaphylaxis to yourself. So that I think is the rarest thing and the weirdest thing that I've seen. And
Wow.
it can be very difficult to manage
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
you can't
Or
take
to
someone's
find, I
hormones
guess.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
To find, you can't
And to
really
find,
remove their
yeah.
hormones. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. But there's a lot of very weird allergies out there.
Yeah, people were sending me things like someone is allergic to water, someone is allergic to this or to that.
Yes.
And what do you think is the best approach to allergies? Can you really tolerate allergies? Like, can you become desensitized to it? Because I know in one live you were talking about like an exposure therapy kind of thing to an allergen.
Right. That's a great question. Yeah. So that's like the main tool that we have to make people become less allergic or become tolerant, like you said. So we do it mostly all the time, every day for environmental allergies, so pollen, dust, mold, animal dander. And it's basically you're taking small increasing doses of the allergen and basically training your immune system to stop reacting as strongly. And for some people are lucky over time, their allergy gets so much less severe that they barely feel anything or they don't need medication anymore. And it's huge for people who suffer from asthma that's triggered by those allergens or eczema, because all of those conditions can even clear up significantly. So it's great because long run, less medication use, better control, and can't live in a bubble, right? So it's very helpful from that standpoint. But then we also desensitize the medication. So let's say someone becomes allergic to a medicine they need to live, like a cardiac patient needs aspirin or a chemo therapy for a cancer patient. We can actually desensitize them to that, which because they need that life-saving medication. That desensitization doesn't last as long as the one for pollen and dust mites and those things. But and the new exciting thing is finally the FDA has approved the very first peanut desensitization in the last 2 years. As up to now, food allergy is life-threatening, right? And we didn't have anything for it. So these people are living in fear. All they can do is avoid the food and carry their EpiPen. But hopefully this is the start of treatments now, new treatments for food allergies. So
that is
really
great hope to a lot of people who can't eat a certain food because of their allergies to certain things. Wow.
Right.
And
exactly.
in relation to food, actually I was flooded with questions about lactose intolerance and gluten-free stuff. Is there a fine line between intolerance versus sensitivity versus allergy, or are these all the same thing?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I'm glad you asked. So an allergy is when your immune system is involved. That is important to differentiate which it is, because the allergy is the one that can become life-threatening, So if you have true allergy to something where your immune system is hypersensitive to it, you really have to stay away, because otherwise it can kill you. But like an intolerance or a sensitivity is not dangerous, because one, your immune system is not involved, and it's more like a side effect to a food, you know what I mean, rather than your body rejecting it, if that makes sense. So like, for example, like carbohydrates or gluten, right? They make everybody feel like very tired and heavy and, things like that. But some people feel it more so than others, so they might be intolerant. And lactose intolerance is also a little different in that basically you're lacking the enzyme, or the enzyme is malfunctioning, so it's not really an allergy, but they all get lumped together, and I think it's important to distinguish which one you have, because they're all managed very differently,
I agree. Thank you so much. That is info from the expert herself. And now let's move on to the start of the show, the biggest news of the year, COVID-19 vaccine, for which you were a researcher for. So, Dr. Parikh, do we really have a 5G microchip in our body right now?
No. No, I wish I had it in my phone, because my phone is behind, but there's no microchip at all. I can guarantee you that.
We've always known groups of like anti-vaxxers, even in the flu vaccine. But I feel like specifically for COVID-19 vaccine, it was more so a vaccine hesitancy versus anti-vaccine. And being the researcher, being the ones who's been in the phases and saw how the process went, can you give us just a gist of really what the COVID-19 vaccine is about? There's a lot of information in the internet. Websites like WebMD, where people outside of healthcare and science might not understand certain words and mechanisms of the vaccine.
Yeah. So, basically there's two types that are approved right now in the US. And one is that mRNA platform. And the best way I can describe it, I'm stealing it from an ex-CDC director, is that it's like a Snapchat message for your immune system, right? It gives information or instructions on how to mount immunity, how to make that spike protein, which will then make your body make antibodies and T cells without actually making you sick with the virus. So I think it's genius. And I think this is probably going to be the vaccine of the future, because when you take the old types of vaccines, is like you take a virus, you have to inactivate it or make it safe. It takes forever, So this, we're able to manufacture quickly, The other type is something called an adenovirus vector. So they basically take the common cold virus, right, that's been inactivated, so we're not making you sick, and then it's bringing that information or that recipe into your immune system that way. So it's a little bit different way to deliver kind of the same result. One is with the messenger RNA and one is with that adenovirus vector. But just to be clear, even the mRNA vaccine, people have been working on it for 30 years. You know, like long time ago. And the same thing with the adenovirus vector. We already have a vaccine, the Ebola one. And that also was like decades and decades of development. So they're not really as new or rushed as people think they are.
Yeah, I think it's understandable regarding how apprehensive people may feel regarding the vaccine, given that the pandemic came out just last year and a few months after we already had the vaccine. But I love how you noted, Doc, that we've already been researching these vaccines for years. Like, I know we've been using mRNA vaccines for like Zika or MERS and other coronaviruses that we have, because COVID-19 is not the only coronavirus that's in the world.
Exactly. So it's almost like we had, you know, like an outline already, you know, or blueprint. So it's not really that rushed if you think about it. A lot of these ideas even predate, you know, both of us. So it's been around for years.
And how much do you trust the safety of these vaccines, given those information that you said?
Yeah, that's, I know, a huge concern. So I do trust the safety, you know, because we're in a pandemic, but, you know, and I know there was a rush to get things out, but none of the safety checks were compromised. If anything, you know, just inefficiencies, like corners were cut, meaning we didn't waste time with one visit, having someone sign consent and bring them back weeks later. And the nice thing is I've seen how the FDA, you know, CDC speaks up when they feel that safety is compromised. So for example, with AstraZeneca in September, the US conducted their own very thorough investigation before they would let trials resume, because there was a case of transverse myelitis, whereas all over the world, they actually resumed the trials like 4 weeks before we did, you know? So I was like, wow, the US is doing a good job of doing their own thorough investigation. And then even now, the NIH called out AstraZeneca just 2 weeks ago. They said, wait, you're cherry picking data. You're not including these cases in February. So I think it just shows that it works, you know, with the checks and balances, that people are being held accountable. And the best proof is like personal story. Like I wouldn't have taken it if I thought it was unsafe at all.
That's why I always tell people, so many healthcare professionals, especially specialists of their field, believe in this vaccine and its safety.
Right. And we're all taking it. You know?
Also, I wanted to ask, given that we have different vaccines now, like Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca as well, I think a big question people have in mind is, which is the best one to take and why? Or do I just take whatever's available to me at this point?
Right. So the best one is what you can get the fastest. and the reason why is all three will save your life. You know, they all prevent death 100%. They all prevent hospitalization 100%. That is key, right? Especially like you remember the first 3 months of COVID in New York, it was just death and dying everywhere. It was devastating.
Death and dying.
Yeah. So that's the most important. And I know people get hung up on efficacy, that this is 70% effective, this is 90, but you can't compare them that way until they're all in the same exact trial at the same time in the same place. That's the only way to know, you know, because Moderna and Pfizer, they wrapped up their results before even the variants were out. So if you study them now against Johnson & Johnson, it might be very similar. We don't know. So I would definitely take any that are offered to you. They're all excellent vaccines.
Yeah. And someone is asking, how do we communicate regarding the hesitancy towards these vaccines, which is a very important question.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I found to be helpful is mostly listening to what people's concerns are, because I think majority of people are not anti-vaxxers or just on the fence, you know, and they do believe in science. So I think they just, once you hear someone out about their concerns and address it, I found that those one-on-one conversations have changed a lot of mine. So that I think has done far more than like any social media thing or any media thing, because then you actually have a chance to like have a dialogue with someone. And I think once people feel their concerns are addressed, most people are actually okay with it, to be honest.
Because there's a lot of ways to explain these things that people have regarding the concerns regarding the vaccines. And really, it's all about evidence-based data. And I think a lot of people are also forgetting that as we're trying to fight this virus, it's still happening at the same time. It's like we're learning as it goes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think people forget that, you know.
And a big question also that came upon my messages was, if I already had COVID and I obviously have antibodies against it, should I still get the vaccine, or should there be a time interval that I should wait before someone gets it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, you should still get it. And the reason is that the immunity from natural infection is so variable. I even have patients that had antibodies in June that no longer do, actually.
Yeah.
So we don't know who will hold on to their antibodies, who won't. Also, we found that the vaccines actually give better immunity and stronger, long-lasting immunity compared to the natural infection. So we still recommend it. In the US, we say you can get it as soon as you feel well or back to normal.
Yeah.
Other countries are making people wait 90 days, but that's more just because I think of a supply issue.
Yeah.
The only reason you'd have to wait 90 days here is if you received one of those monoclonal antibodies as part of your treatment.
Yeah.
Then it's a good idea to space it out. But otherwise, if you're feeling well or back to normal, you should get vaccinated. Absolutely.
Yeah. A big question ever since even the news of vaccines came out were long-term effects. What is the idea of a long-term effect? And is it measured in like months, in years, in decades? And do we expect, or are you scared of long-term effects from these vaccines?
The majority of long-term effects from vaccines happen fairly quickly. So most happen the same day or within hours or minutes, right?
Yeah.
And even in extreme cases, it might be a week later, 2 weeks later. So we already have over 6 months plus of data, you know? So those events that may happen like years down the line, nobody knows. I'm not psychic, but it's very, very unlikely. But what people need to remember is the long-term effects of COVID-19 are far more devastating, you know? I mean, you probably see it too every day, like people who are completely healthy on dialysis, suffering from stroke. Like these are things that don't go away easily. So I think people need to remember what has worse long-term effects, you know. I would rather take my chances on a vaccine with a very unlikely long-term effect than COVID, which almost everyone, majority of COVID patients have some symptoms 6 months later, 9 months later, and it's not mild. It's very debilitating.
And a big question also people have were, if I have allergies to certain medications or let's say dye or penicillin, would it be okay for them to get the vaccine?
Yeah, you know, I get asked this every day as an allergist. So for the most part, yes. So very severe allergic patients have received the vaccine safely. The only time you should avoid it is if you're allergic to one of the ingredients in the vaccine itself. So for Moderna and Pfizer, polyethylene glycol is considered one of the ones that might be a trigger. And for Johnson & Johnson, it's something called polysorbate 80. But again, these are two compounds that are in so many things. You know, they're in Miralax and toothpaste and, you know, and polysorbates in the flu shot and hepatitis shot, you know, so probably if you don't know you're allergic to those things, you're not, because we all interact with it on a daily basis, you know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parikh. And as a very last question, vaccine and pregnancy and infertility.
Yes.
From the expert herself, please clear the air on this.
Right. Yeah. So just to clear the air, one, the vaccine does not cause infertility. And I can tell you that's true because women who got the vaccine when they were not pregnant are now pregnant. So if it causes infertility, that could not have happened. So that, and also just from a scientific standpoint, there's no mechanism that makes sense. Like I said, that mRNA really degrades very fast from your body. The half-life is about 1 week. So it clears out of your system very quickly. But, you know, women have gotten pregnant that were in our trials who were not pregnant before. So it definitely does not affect it. And then for pregnancy, we are recommending it because pregnancy is a high-risk condition. If you're pregnant and you get COVID-19, you are at very high risk of, one, losing your own life or your baby's life. Not to mention all the other complications that come with the COVID patient. So I know in Detroit, they have to do a lung transplant on a healthy pregnant woman in her 30s.
I saw that.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So to me, it would make much more sense to get the vaccine, protect you and your baby, because now there's 2 lives at stake. Another benefit too is that we've now found that the baby comes out immune, you know, for pregnant women who got the shot. So that's great. You know, it's like 2 for 1. And then we now have data with pregnant women that have been vaccinated. I think it's over 20,000 now. And there was no increased preterm labor, no miscarriages, no eclampsia, preeclampsia. So it's all very good news. You know, and then again, I always say personal experience. I think people like to hear that I'm practicing what I'm preaching, but like I'm a childbearing age. I'm hoping to start a family soon, and I got the vaccine because I want to be protected should I get pregnant. So again, if any of that was even 1% true, I personally would not have gotten it. So for what it's worth to other people.
Yeah, and the AstraZeneca and the thrombosis issue. What can you say about that, given that you were in the research for AstraZeneca?
Yeah, so actually it's extremely rare. And I know today the European Union kind of put out a statement that they think that there might be a link. But even with that link, it's like such a rare link. So basically, it was 37 cases they found of thrombosis out of 17 million that they had vaccinated. But again, I like to give people perspective. If you're hospitalized with COVID-19, 1 in 20 of those people get clots. Again, it's very common. And even if you're recovering at home, 1 in 100 get it. So that's extremely like more common, you know? So again, I still think it's a good vaccine. I mean, we've been running that trial since September, and we actually haven't seen any clots, any serious side effects. Granted, some people got placebo, some got the real one, but people are doing very well. So even with that link, I would still take it because again, you're much more likely to get a blood clot with the real virus, you know?
And also a small group of that is not really considered even a correlation yet until it reaches a certain percentage of within the millions of people who have gotten the shot so far.
Yeah, and we don't even know how it's possible. We don't have the mechanism. We have some theories, you know, that it might be similar to this heparin-induced blood clot that forms. But again, there's no heparin in the shot, so we don't know really why it could be happening. So again, in the grand scheme of things, it's still extremely rare. And even those European researchers themselves said the benefit of the vaccine still outweighs the risk because it's so rare.
I feel like also everything in medicine is a risk-benefit analysis. And in our case, for the COVID-19 vaccine, the benefits outweighs the risks that have been posed so far. And I feel like people also tend to extrapolate data from what we have so far as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a great shot. And again, even if it's not approved here, but if you're offered that when it is approved here or elsewhere, it's still worth taking because it will save your life.
And as a final word from you, Dr. Parikh, do you think that the COVID-19 vaccine is really our hope for ending this COVID-19 battle?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the only hope because in the history of mankind, there's been no infection that's reached herd immunity without a vaccine, you know? So I don't really see any other way forward, especially with these new variants coming out. It's even more important we get vaccinated because the faster we vaccinate people, the less likely there'll be variants, less likely there'll be surges. I mean, all of us want to get back to normal, you know? We all love seeing our friends. We all love traveling. We all love all of the above, you know?
Dr. Parikh, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing, spreading all of this today and evidence-based information, not just about the vaccine, but in medicine in general. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight. And thank you for giving me time as well. Thank you so much. You told me that anything for a co-Taurus. So
especially May 9th.
May 9th. I mean, is there any better
it's
day,
fate.
right? It's fate. Dr. Parikh, thank you so much. If there's anything else that you would like to say to everyone tonight?
No, that's it. And you know, if you don't believe me, Darth Vader over here also says to get the vaccine. That's my husband's. I promised I would show it on. I was like, I'm not showing that on TV, but I'll show it on Instagram Live.
I'm gonna screenshot it.
He's like, there's so many Star Wars fans. So Darth Vader. I was like, all right, fine.
At this point, we're gonna have 100% herd immunity because of Darth Vader. Everyone's gonna get the vaccine.
Hey, if they don't want to listen to me, they can listen to him.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parikh. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.